just, stuck.
Yes, it's been a fun year.
And wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone's been very, very busy. All of us have. It's been a frantic start to 2021. But what I'll do is I'm going to run and get my cable because I can see that my battery is going to die. So I'm going to hit myself onto mute and put my video off. As I run upstairs, and I'm going to allow Mary Beth to kick off because she was here first, Terry. So she's going to do an introduction just as to what her interests are and what she's doing at the moment, and then we'll kick over to Terry.
Great.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm Mary Beth Gassman, and I'm a professor at Rutgers University, although I live in Philadelphia. Let's see, what have I been up to lately? Well, I have been thinking a lot about leadership issues because I'm about to bring in a new cohort for, we have a program called Minority Serving Institution Aspiring Leaders, and we're about to bring in our third cohort of leaders. And we're really excited because so far we've produced 5 presidents, including the newest president, Saul Jimenez, who's new president of California State University, Fresno. So we also have a president of a tribal college, and we're just really excited about that program. So I've been thinking a lot about that. I also have been, I've actually been thinking a lot about what are just the most salient issues in higher education, especially with regard to issues of race and leadership, faculty, kinds of along those lines, because I'm going to be a contributing writer with Forbes starting in like a day. And so I've been thinking about all the different things I want to write about, and just lots of interesting things. And then just doing a lot of work related to issues that I see out there. So like with my center, we've been doing an institute, we've been doing work related to some anti-Asian hate panels, which I thought were really, really helpful. Today, we did a panel related to bullying within the academy. Just really trying to think about the things that are happening out there where people might need a conversation, interaction, might be curious, have questions, but don't know who to ask. And so bringing in people from across the country with a whole variety of different expertise to talk. And yeah, so I've been working on lots of things like that. So.
Yeah, and great news about Forbes. That's very cool.
Oh, yeah,
that's quite something. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited.
One day when I'm all grown up, maybe. Don't think they'll ever want any of my insights there. Terry, over to you.
Yes, well, I'm actually in the midst of, luckily you can't see my office right now because I'm in the midst of all the stuff I'm working on, finishing up another book project. So my previous book was Radical Empathy. And so I'm a professor of political science. I've been at University of Washington, UT Austin, and I was the provost at Menlo College, also vice provost when I was at UT Austin. And I left Menlo College 3 years ago to start a company called the Center for Higher Education Leadership, which has transitioned into Brighter Higher Ed. And we're actually, because I've written the book Radical Empathy, we're doing a lot of workshops and leadership training for people around DEI. And but the book, Radical Empathy, is really focused on how we can, in each individually, starting at the individual level, change our society because there's so much work we need to do. And I use my own stories and storytelling to help people understand and learn how to practice empathy, because I think empathy is really critical for us to understand each other, but it has to go beyond just being able to. Well, first, you have to, be willingness. Well, I'll go through the 6 steps. You have to be willing to be vulnerable, which I model all throughout the book. Being grounded in who you are, which is something I really work on all the time. Being open to the experiences of others, practicing empathy because it's not something that just comes to you, and then. taking action and then creating change. And it's really the critical component of radical empathy is those last two steps, which is really being willing to, take action and create change. Because imagine if we could mobilize, the power of, people across the country to really, step up and individually understand how we are all kind of swimming in the sea of white supremacy, and that we all are, have a certain responsibility to understand that and then act on it. Because, I live in a neighborhood that, I live close to Menlo College, where I was provost, and then right next door to Stanford, my alma mater. And, I look around and, I'm one of very few Black people in this neighborhood. And we need to understand that the reason for that is because years and years ago, somebody decided to make some rules and regulations that basically cut out Black people and other people of color, specifically from living in this neighborhood. I mean, there were laws. When I bought my house in Austin, Texas, it said, nobody of African descent can buy this house. This is a 1929 house. And so, those are the things that, obviously it's illegal now. They can't do that anymore, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And, so my neighbors, it's funny, I walk around here and I see all the Black Lives Matter signs and I say, well, that may be true, but what are you doing about it? And how are you making sure that, people of color can afford to live in this neighborhood? So so anyway, in the realm of higher education, obviously a lot of this is incredibly relevant because, we look around our faculties and they're, we're lucky if we have a handful of Black faculty, a handful of, it's what drives me crazy, especially in this country. I'm getting ready to take a position at McGill University in Canada, who's going to be working very hard on this. But what drives me crazy is that how can we have such a low percentage of Latino and Hispanic faculty? That just boggles my mind that we have not created a pipeline. And so, I'm focused more, actually my job at McGill, besides being a professor on the political science faculty, is going to be the provost academic lead and advisor for anti-Black racism. So we've specified that we're going to hire 85 Black faculty in the next 10 years. And that's why I took the job, is because it's, we're being very specific about this is what we're going to do. And so I'm going to help try to work on the pipeline and making sure faculty are, and when we have positions, that faculty know that there's people out there who can be hired and they aren't complaining about the pipeline. Even for women, I know that this is going to be a big issue in the STEM fields, that hiring women is still kind of their priority because they haven't even been able to gain equity there. But even in my own field of political science, so sorry, I'm talking because that's what I do. But
you can see you've just come off a session, Terry, and
yes.
and that you're both incredibly passionate about this particular field and the
Yes.
conversations that stir from it. And I think that your summary at the end is so critically important when you're speaking about taking action and making that change and making the impact, right? Like that's fundamentally what we've got to do, and we're not doing enough of that. There's lots of talk and speculation around things, and I'm also seeing very interesting, we're getting a lot of, and I can't say a lot of, I've only got a sprinkling of anecdotes, but there's a couple of people that I know that have been pointed into DEI roles at institutions and also at corporations, singing the praises of Black lives and more broadly other ethnic groups, yet they still white, and it's just fascinating how that still happens as well. And yes, of course, there's going to be people that are well equipped to do the job, but I just find, we look at things in quite funny ways at times. So for the benefit of just stirring up some of the controversy and having a conversation around it, is what about meritocracy and about finding the right person for the job? Like this, there's been reverse affirmative action in South Africa, for example. Formerly from where I'm from, it's probably about 25 years now in the making. There's many arguments that have said that slavery was abolished a very long time ago. There's been ample time to kind of rectify things and give people the opportunities necessary. Tell us about, I'll hit with Mary Beth first. because then Terry will already steamroll it home. But what has been how do you feel about the right person for the job versus going out and finding 85 individuals that may or may not, I'm going to put my foot in it, so I'm not going to go there. Tell me about meritocracy versus supporting other groups of individuals. Mary Beth.
Okay, so a couple of things that I would say are, so I just finished writing this book about systemic racism and faculty hiring. It's coming out in next year in with Princeton University Press, and I worked on it for 5 years, okay? And I ended up interviewing people. I interviewed provosts and deans and search committee chairs and department chairs and vice provosts for diversity. And so I interviewed well over 100 people, and I used all of the available national data to take a look at everything from pipelines to search committee training and practices to what kinds of candidates are out there. And I wrote a long, extensive chapter related to quality and merit and sameness and whiteness, okay? And I learned a lot, right? And I learned a lot, and everybody in the book is interviewed anonymously because there's no way that they would tell me what they told me if their names were attached to it, okay? So one thing I want to say is that I haven't given a lot of talks related to it yet because I'm going to wait till the book comes out, but I was giving a talk to an honors event. So it was about 1,000 people at a community college in California. And I decided to give the talk because someone knew I was doing it. And, I decided to do it. And during the middle of it, I got a question. And one of the questions was exactly what you just said, right? Why don't we just hire the best person? And so this is how they said it. They said, well, if I want a building, right? I want an architect for a building, I would want the best architect, okay? So why would I hire, well, I would just want the best. Why wouldn't you just want the best faculty? And so what I said to them was, okay, so here's the thing. You don't know what the best is. You have no idea what the best building looks like unless you have included a whole diverse group of architects, because you have no idea the brilliance that you could uncover. Here's an example. Simone Bowles, right? Who just Biles, who just did the who just did this
gymnastics.
double pike. How do you say it? It's like a double pike.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it, but yeah.
On the plank, right? Or I don't follow it enough, but she basically, here's this Black woman who ends up doing something that nobody else can do, and they can't even rank it, and they won't even give her the points she deserves because and this is the most amazing thing, they don't want to raise the bar too high because then the other people can't meet it. Okay, so here's a Black woman who is a powerhouse in gymnastics, does something nobody else can do. And rather than say, she's raised the bar, folks, come on and meet it. What happens is, well, we're not going to award her the points because we don't want other people to have to jump up to this level, because she showed us what happens when you're inclusive in terms of a gymnastics team. She's raised the bar. So I think that what I say to people is, you don't know what's possible if you are not inclusive. And I don't think there's anyone out there saying, and of course, I know you were playing devil's advocate, Warren, so I'm not beating up on you, but basically, this is a good question because so many people ask this, right?
They ask it, yeah.
They ask it over and over and over again. And the thing is that nobody's saying go out there and only hire let's say 85 Latinx faculty. No one is saying that. What they're really saying
actually, we are, but that's okay.
I mean, yeah. But that's because we don't have anybody there, right? We don't have anyone there. But basically, the only reason why we would be doing things like that, I mean, in the norm, let's just say the day-to-day norm,
Right.
that's not happening. There,
Right,
right now,
and it's not.
it's not. Yeah, it's not. There's nobody with that agenda. Now, you do have people right now, because it's been made evident that there are these huge disparities, saying, okay, let's just even the playing field here, right? By bringing in folks. But here's what no one is asking for. No one is asking for unqualified people to come
That's
in.
exactly right.
No one is asking for that. Nobody,
Right.
right? So
Right.
that's not a thing. And the other thing is, prior to what we've been experiencing right now, with few exceptions, what you've been having happen is, and I can prove this, I can actually prove this with data, is that people have just been reproducing sameness and reproducing whiteness. And so the two top reasons why people get faculty jobs, these are the reasons: where they went to school and who their advisor is. Doesn't matter if they publish anything. I mean, these are new faculty, right? It's not really about even them. It's who their advisor was and where they went to school. Those are the two top reasons. And guess what? Guess who the most underrepresented group is in attendance of PhD programs in the major research institutions in the United States? And let's look in the US, right? Where do you think what's the most underrepresented group in terms of, like, I can't bring Native Americans into that because they're just so underrepresented at 1%. But after that, it's African Americans. They are not represented in the PhD programs in major research institutions. Guess where faculty come from? Major research institutions. So this is like it's just
It's a self-perpetuating thing.
Yeah, and until people stop, until we either decide that, you know what, you can get your degree from University of Georgia, which is not an American or an Association of American Universities. The AAU institutions are the ones that produce the most faculty. There's a prejudice in favor of them. So until we decide that you can go to University of Georgia or Claremont or Arizona State, that you can go to these institutions and get a PhD and you're still can be a legit faculty member at a major research institution, we either have to do that or we have to get more Black people and Latinx folks into those institutions that are being privileged. Or, I mean, I wish we could just stop privileging certain institutions. I would like to see us do that, but this thing is just messy. It's just messy. It's very messy.
So,
and that's what's happening, though, is we're seeing more, basically we have to reach out to a broader range of institutions for our faculty. There's just no two ways about it. But so there's several things we've done in my field of political science. First of all, we're creating our own so it's all about networking, right? What you're saying is, it's about the institution and the advisor. Well, that's all networking, right? We go to our annual political science meeting and I go and talk to my friend who's at Notre Dame and say, hey, I've got this great student, you should hire them. And that's how it works. And so that's what, now that there's kind of enough of us, we're going around and that's what we're doing. We're hiring each other's students, we're sending each other our undergraduates. That's one way to do it. But I always like to tell the story because I was in grad school in the early mid 90s, and so there were a few of us African Americans at UCLA, and I love to tell this, and I write a lot in Inside Higher Ed. So, and I had an article about this. My friend, one of my best friends, who's now an esteemed faculty member at University of Michigan, all kinds of accolades, is teaching. He started out in community college and finished his undergrad at San Jose State. And he got into UCLA because they had what was back then basically an affirmative action program. I was in the same program, although I came out of Stanford, but my grades weren't, I didn't have a 4.0 out of Stanford by any stretch. And it was interesting because they told me when I was applying to UCLA, they said, well, you have to get, a 1900 on the GRE, and then, we can give you this fellowship. And I got 1890, which was good enough. But it's basically taking a chance on but then I remember and I tell these stories in my book. I went to the meeting for grad students who'd have been admitted with fellowships, and they're trying to convince us to come, and it's like, well, all of you got like 2100 on the GRE, and I'm just thinking to myself, I didn't. And guess who two of the most successful faculty from, or now faculty from UCLA are? Me and Vince Hutchings, who went to San Jose State, and me, who had to get into UCLA on an affirmative action program. And the interesting thing is, and this is the thing I put, is we have to be twice as good to get half the credit. And that's the other problem, right? Is that, I can tell you my credentials are, spotless and beyond. And that's the problem is, it's really something that you have to, we all know we have to be beyond better in order to get just the same amount of credit as that guy over there who has the right, faculty advisor. We have to be so much better just to get the same amount of attention as that guy. So that's what has to change. And that's why I don't have any problem with saying there's, I can easily hire 85 faculty in the next 10 years because, they're out there. They exist right now. And the problem is that, the way the structure of higher ed is that, it's the department, and within the department, there's the hiring committee, and who's making up the hiring committees? It's the senior faculty who are all white men. And they aren't going to look at that woman over there, and they aren't going to look at that Latino over there, and they aren't going to look at that Black student who has all kinds of promise and, is doing great work. And so, it's like this, we just have to stretch ourselves and say, hey, I am going to look at that student from University of Georgia or from one of the non-AAU institutions. And that's what's happening now as we're seeing more and more of this, is that we're having to create that pipeline.
Yeah, great. And so yes, did want to throw the spanner in the works, but look what it created. So I enjoyed that debate. So Valerie, questions from you. Have you got anything that is burning you or Ciara before I continue?
I don't know about questions so much as maybe a comment if there's time for that, or
yeah, go.
But I'll yield to Ciara for theirs. I was just going to say, I would say,
Sorry,
from my experience as well, I'm
sorry, just please just introduce yourself quickly, just for the benefit.
Oh
of
yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, so I'm Valerie Palunas. I work in the University of California, Irvine Division of Continuing Education, and I work in our corporate training and educational partnerships department. So my job is primarily to work with corporate clients and help them develop custom trainings. And I actually do a lot of instructor hiring. And we don't necessarily hire faculty. And I was thinking when you were talking about looking at credential of what institution people come from, I know our team has had to, and our division has had to fight on main campus sometimes on instructor approvals if they didn't come from the right university. Even though they had, 25 years experience in the field, tons of war stories, and that's the kind of curriculum we deliver. We've had to go to bat for people sometimes. So I just wanted to like reaffirm that. And someone that I'm trying to work with to do diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging trainings. When he was doing his teaching demo, he was talking about, and I wish I could remember where he found the stat, but he was talking about in candidate pools in final interview rounds, if you increase the number from 2 to 5 people, when there's 2 people, you have 0% chance that any of them that are hired will be someone from an underrepresented group. But when you have 5, you have, I forget the percentage, but it's this massive increase in likelihood that you will get someone from an underrepresented group. And I thought that stat was really revealing, that just a tweak to your final candidate pool could have such a difference, that I just kind of wanted to throw that into the mix.
That's actually one of the things that I recommend in my book, is that rather than bringing in 3 candidates, that departments bring in 5, because it doesn't really cost that much money. And actually they were able to do it for almost free during COVID. And it doesn't really cost that much money, but it does. There is research that shows, there's empirical quantitative research that shows that if you bring in 5 or 6 candidates, instead of the 3 that is normally, that your chances of getting a person of color or a woman are much higher, and especially a person of color. And so that's one of the recommendations that I make. And actually the institutions that were making the most progress were using that strategy. Even in math and physics, they were making a difference. And then Another thing I was going to bring up is another issue, and Terry, I'd be really, really interested in what you have to say about this, but basically a lot of people told me, and these were provosts telling me this, they said that for some reason, and I know what the reason is, but for some reason, they, that search committee chairs and department chairs, if they basically saw bringing in faculty of color as you do that when as like an extra, right? That's a bonus. So if you want to bring in faculty of color, well, the provost office should give you a little bit of money, but you don't, if you're not getting extra money, then you don't bring in faculty of color. I mean, if it happens, it happens, but faculty of color come in as a bonus. So I heard this so many times, and I mean, I was pulling out my hair by the end hearing this, because of course I've seen it over and over, but it was interesting because the provost would say, you know, this is my biggest frustration, is I have to say to people, no, you're not going to get a bonus to bring, you're not getting rewarded for bringing faculty of color in. That's your job, you know, like, so Terry, I'm so interested if that resonates with you, if you see that, your thoughts.
Yeah, so there was kind of an era, I'd say it's kind of died off now, but the 1990s where there was a target of opportunity hire.
Oh yeah.
And so departments would compete because it was, you know, they desperately wanted more faculty. And so they'd be put in competition for these positions. And, you know, it was clearly something that was supposed to be, you know, extra, and you get an extra faculty line. And so that's been kind of the mentality, but I've seen other ways to approach it, which it comes to your point, which is another way of kind of making sure is that when I was applying for my faculty position at University of Washington, they had a requirement that at least if it came down to 3 candidates, one of them had to be a woman or the dean wouldn't release the line. So you had to at least have one woman in the final field, or, you know, and the problem is that the whole, you know, faculty, you have to go out and find those candidates, right?
Yes.
You can't just say, oh, we're just gonna, you know, because sometimes, you know, it's just saying we're accepting applications isn't enough, because you have to be willing to step out and encourage people to apply and say, yes, we are interested, because, you know, too often people won't apply because they aren't asked.
Yeah.
No, that's fair. So just tying it up, I'm extremely conscious of people's time, but what I would love to do is just draw it back to the unit of inquiry that we're busy with at the moment, which is really around leading higher education. And so in Module 8, we speak a lot about these types of issues, but it's really about advice, and to your point, Terry, about what do people need to do, aside from reading both of your respective books and getting you to speak about these things. What are some recommendations or one recommendation that you, and I mean, you've already shared one or two now, that you can share with leaders in higher education as to what they could be thinking about differently, and what are the benefits, the return on investment in that, that if either of you could articulate that succinctly in just a short version of it.
Sure. Well, one thing that I hope that people will start to understand is that of all generations is that the world is changing so rapidly, right? It's so rapid. If you just think about what has happened in the past year and a half, it's a whirlwind across the world. And I think that from my perspective, I think that it's so important to have like to work in a diverse environment across all different forms of diversity in order to keep up, you know, like that helps you immensely because you have such diverse skills, you have such diverse perspectives. I mean, just think about all of the different people who have been the subject of hate over the last year and a half, right? And how do you manage that, and how do you take care of people, and how do you make sure people succeed? It's really important for me that I have people who can speak to that working with me, right? I don't know the answers to all of that. I have to bring in people, and I think if you can bring in a diverse group of people and you can be open to the fact that you could be wrong, that you might have been holding opinions and perspectives that are way off base, and you have to learn that you might need to change some of them, right? And that you can be open, and that you realize that everyone will learn in your organization, in your environment, in your university, if you're open to bringing in people who disagree with you, who have a varying perspectives, right? I'm just going to tell you a little story. It's kind of silly, but my daughter goes to Bryn Mawr College. Okay, it's a women's college. And we were having, so I took her out, she finished all her coursework, and I finished for her whole life, right? Basically, she finished her bachelor's degree, at least at this point. And I took her out for like Mexican food to celebrate. And we're sitting there. Now, this is kind of weird that I'm telling you this, but she raised her arm and I noticed like a little bit of underarm hair, right? And I was like, oh my God. And she looks at me and she's like, oh, Mom. She's like, I'm around women all the time. None of us care. She's like, we don't care. And by the way, it doesn't make me a bad person. And it doesn't say anything about me, does it? And I said, I know, but I hate underarm hair. And she's just like, yeah, that's just because you've been socialized to hate underarm hair. And I'm like, okay, it's true. And it is true. And even though I didn't like seeing it, and she's like, I'm going to shave it before graduation. Don't worry, I won't embarrass anybody. But it reminded me of, you know what? I am socialized that way, right? And I needed her to push back at me, and she pushed back at me a good one too, Terry. I'm telling you, she pushed back at me, and she just basically said, you're just socialized, it doesn't make me a bad person. And I use that as just like an example. And also that, I had to have a little come to Jesus moment there, but as an example, because I think there are many things much bigger than underarm hair that we react that way to. And it's just because we're socialized, we're not familiar, it's different, it's to us. And we kind of need to get over that. So I think that's why it's really, really important, not only to give people opportunity, but also it's important for all of us. We all benefit when we work in a more diverse environment. And don't ever tell my daughter I told that story.
No.
Out of here, okay?
We'll keep that very secret. But like just before Terry interjects there, I'll summarize afterwards. Go, Terry. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. I would just take what Mary Beth said and add to it that, being a leader is a responsibility. And I think sometimes we don't always understand that. I mean, so I always tell this story when I was promoted, to this really big position to be vice provost at UT Austin. And, I'd just gotten tenure, and my previous administrative position has been I started the Center for European Studies there. So this is a huge leap, and it was like drinking from a fire hose, et cetera. But one of the more memorable moments, I was just sitting there and I was over our international programs, and I had a faculty member come to talk to me because I was going to shut down his program because he was mucking it up. and this fact, well, why do you have to shut it down? And I realized I couldn't blame it on anybody else. It was my decision. And that was the first time I realized, wow, now I understand the meaning of the word, the buck stops here, because, I had to make that decision. I couldn't blame it on the provost. I couldn't blame it on the president. It was my decision. And, that was kind of I always remember that whenever I'm having to, make a tough decision, that, it's a huge responsibility, and you are impacting somebody's life. But, the thing that keeps it together for me, which is, part of this whole idea around radical empathy as well, is, having integrity. And making sure that I understand that, I have to take responsibility, but also I have to have integrity about my decision making, and that I'm doing it for the right reason. So that's my take.
Yeah, look, I don't want to, there's so many things, of course, but I feel I can run down a rabbit hole if I start another conversation. And there's
we let Ciara make a comment, because she hasn't
of course
had a chance to say anything.
Oh, that's okay. I don't really have a big question, but thank you, Terry and Mary Beth. It's super interesting, everything that you shared. And mine's not from faculty. I work at, I do contracting for a tech company, but it's interesting. Just one comment is that I found it so fascinating that our campus recruiting, our university team actually doesn't require our technology as a requirement to be hired, because it could be a barrier to people being able to have access to the role. So I just thought that was really something super interesting, and I wanted to share that piece, but mine's much more in the industry higher ed partnership crossover.
Awesome.
Any closing remarks from you, Valerie? Anything that you would like to add?
I don't think so. I mean, I really appreciate what both Mary Beth and Terry shared today. I'm going to get your book, Terry, because I definitely like that there's talk around the concept of empathy. I would agree that not everybody is thinking about that. I'm glad this is a part of the course in general, this topic in particular. The institution that I represent, Warren knows this now because he's met with folks from our Office of Inclusive Excellence, but it's very, very important to our institution and to me personally. So I'm just really glad that we have the opportunity to talk to both of you today, and that there's a module dedicated to talking about what it takes to be a leader. And this is a part of that. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, only a pleasure. And we want to do a lot more here. There's so many interesting conversations to be had. And I think the biggest thing is the fear of having the conversations themselves, which I'm a big proponent of the thinking that we've got two tools. We've got conversation, or we've got violence, and really those are the two tools that we have at our disposal. And if we can't communicate through something, we generally turn to violence to resolve it. And so I'm very alive to the fact that we can put our foot in it and make mistakes, and that we're going through some very interesting times as in society, whereby an apology is no longer good enough. Things we did 50 years ago is no longer good enough. And so we're at an interesting inflection point in just how we operate as human beings. And I think we've got an enormous amount of work to do, but I do worry about the fact that that we get stifled in communication, and that we're too afraid to have the conversation. So this is very much why we have this group, in order to discuss this in a private community where hopefully we can share our views and without reprisal, and just really have a good discussion about what the future could look like. So with that, I thank you for your time, Mary Beth, Terry, and Valerie and Ciara. We've got a ton on our respective plates, but Mary Beth and Terry in particular, you guys are just doing outstanding work. Really, really, really appreciate the contribution that you're making, both to this program, but also to the world. And very privileged to be calling you both friends and engage with you often. So thanks for your time today, and look forward to catching up again soon.
Sounds great. Lovely to spend time with you. Thank you.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye. Have a nice day or night or whatever it is.
Yes, morning.
Bye.